I don't tell jokes. I tell anecdotes and lies, but I don't tell them. Anyway, this is a joke. And it's not a joke, it's a story. It's a true story. It really happened.
Aren't you going to blow out the candles?
I'm lucky if I can get my cigar into my holder. I got nothing much to lose. Never get the blues. If you asked me to get up and do it in the room here, I couldn't do it. But on the stage, I can. Because the audience is so wonderful.
I'm lucky if I can get my cigar into my holder. I got nothing much to lose. Never get the blues. If you asked me to get up and do it in the room here, I couldn't do it. But on the stage, I can because the audience is so wonderful. For 80 years, George Burns was America's favorite comedian. He earned a massive fortune worth over $30 million. His 2 adopted children thought they would inherit it all. But in March 1996, Burns made a decision that nobody saw coming. He wrote his kids completely out of his will. Every single dollar went somewhere else entirely. His family was left with nothing but questions. Friends say there were secrets Burns never told anyone. The real reason he abandoned his children involves a shocking betrayal that happened years earlier. Hasn't your doctor said to you, "Now, George, you got my doctor is dead"? George Burns came into the world on January 20, 1896 in a small apartment at 95 Pittsburgh Street on New York's Lower East Side. His name was Nathan Birnbaum. Then and life around him moved fast and loud. His parents Dora and Louis had escaped hardship in Ruptica and Galatia and carried old world habits into a cramped new world. They had 12 children and he was the 9th. The family squeezed into 3 tiny rooms where warmth came from bodies more than blankets. Louis worked as a caner and barely brought in enough to keep the family alive. Dora scrubbed clothes for neighbors to help. Most kids on the Lower East Side wore hand-me-downs and shared beds. Many nights' dinner was nothing more than potatoes and onions. Even bread felt like a gift. Still, George remembered the laughter, the Yiddish jokes, and the rhythm of life in those rooms. That humor stayed with him. Everything changed in 1904. He was 8 when his father died suddenly at 47. The family had no savings and no backup. School ended for him after 5th grade because he had to help. He stood on street corners shining shoes for 5 cents a shine. It was cold, dirty, and long, but kept going. Sometimes he earned a little extra singing with a children's quartet called the Imperial Five. One night their promoter ran off with their money. George had nowhere to go and slept in alleyways, learning what real hunger and fear felt like. Yet he carried those nights like secret training. They taught him toughness and street sense that he would use all his life. As he grew, his identity shifted. Family called him Natty. Other kids called him Shoes Birnbaum because of his shine box. Herald cigars. He sold newspapers. He slipped into burlesque theaters to watch comedians shape laughter from nothing. He wanted that life. During his early teens, he made a reckless bet and tried swimming across the East River. The current pulled him under and he almost drowned. That moment scared him, but it also sparked something wild in him. Soon he tried on new stage names. George Burns came from his brother Izzy, George Birnbaum, and from the Burns Brothers Coal Company. He had once stolen coal from them to keep his family warm. Later he even tried names like Willie Delight and Captain Betts just to fool booking agents and stay in work. At 14 he felt the urge to run and he did. In 1910 he left home and joined the Mickey Rooney Stock Company hoping to make it as a singer. His first paid performance happened in a Midwestern theater. But he froze, forgot every lyric, and the crowd booed him until pennies rained on the stage. He was fired on the spot. The humiliation hurt, but he always said it was the best lesson he ever got. After that, he wandered through the Midwest singing on ferryboats, in brothel, on street corners, anywhere that might offer a little money. Some days he barely ate, some nights he barely slept, but he felt alive and he kept moving. By 1913, he was 17 and still chasing the stage. He formed a singing trio called the Burning Three with sisters Beatrice and Irene. They toured rough vaudeville houses filled with tough crowds. Irene suddenly eloped with a sailor, leaving George and Beatrice stranded with no cash. George begged for train fare to get home and returned to New York with empty pockets and a heavy ego. But quitting never crossed his mind. Those years taught him to improvise, to deal with shady theater owners who refused to pay, and to handle the sting of failure without losing his fire. When World War I arrived, he tried to join the Navy, but they rejected him for being too short. He was 5 feet 7 inches and they wanted taller men. Instead of giving up, he found another route. He disguised himself as a woman named Barbara and slipped into groups of entertainers traveling on troop ships. It was risky. One mistake could have meant arrest, but he pulled it off. He sang for homesick soldiers while praying he would not be discovered. Later, he laughed about it, but at the time it was pure survival. Reinvention saved him more than once. In 1916, he thought he had found his break when he teamed up with dancer Elsie Lorraine. They created a ballroom act and performed along the East Coast. But Elsie left him for a wealthier man and George was stranded again. Broke and tired, he took a job as a soda jerk on Coney Island's boardwalk. As he served ice cream, he practiced jokes on customers. Some laughed, some walked away. All of them taught him timing. He learned how to read people and adjust on the spot. He later joked that this job did more for his career than any producer ever had. By 1920, he was performing alone and using the name George Burns full-time. He worked in speakeasies during Prohibition where raids could happen at any moment. One night, he had to hide in a coal bin to avoid being caught. When he climbed out, he was covered in black soot and humiliated, yet strangely energized. These nights made him realize he needed someone to balance him on stage. He needed a partner who could match his rhythm. That partner appeared in 1923. He met Gracie Allen in Chicago at a booking office. He was auditioning with dancer Maggie Healy, but he fired her in frustration when she forgot her lines. Later, he bumped into Gracie, a 27-year-old Irish-American performer whose family act had fallen apart. Their first meeting was simple, but he felt something fresh around her. He asked if she wanted to try his act. They rehearsed, and George planned to be the funny man while she played straight. But when they stepped in front of a crowd, everything flipped. People laughed at Gracie's innocent confusion. Her voice, her timing, her quick reactions pulled every eye toward her. George saw it instantly and changed the act overnight. Gracie became the eccentric character, and he became the patient observer who let her shine. Their first show together at the Hill Street Theater in New York proved the magic was real. The audience loved them. Laughter rolled in waves. That early routine called 6040 showed them what worked and what did not. George said there was a feeling between Gracie and the audience that he could never compete with. By 1924, they joined the Pantages circuit and built hits like their Dizzy and Lamb Chops routines. They earned $50 a week and even bought their first car. Life finally felt like it was opening. By late 1925, George felt a fear he did not like. Another performer was courting Gracie. On Christmas Eve, he told her she had to choose. Marry him or walk away. It was bold and messy, but Gracie agreed. They married on January 17, 1926 in Cleveland. The ceremony was small, but the impact was huge. Their personal life and career braided together from that moment. Weeks later, they signed a 6-year contract with RKO, which required that neither perform alone. It locked them together in a partnership that would last decades. By the mid-1930s, nearly 40 million people tuned in each week. That number was almost unreal at a time when most shows did not reach half that audience. The style was loose, mostly improvised, and full of surprises. Listeners could hear real laughter, real confusion, and real sparks between them. Ratings jumped from 19.3 to 31.3 within a year, a rise of more than 60%. They had shown that radio did not need tight scripts to work. It only needed honesty, rhythm, and two people who knew how to play off each other. Then in 1933, Gracie ran a fake presidential campaign as part of a long comedy routine. She called it the surprise party. She toured 39 states and even printed ballots. Some voters genuinely wrote her name in during the real 1940 election, which confused local officials until they realized it was all a stunt. She promised to tax only the right kind of clouds and planned to give cabinet jobs to friends with nice outfits. The mascot was a kangaroo and the slogan was "It's in the bag." The campaign boosted their radio ratings by nearly 40% and made news outlets question how easily entertainment could blend with politics. It was a joke, but it held a mirror up to the country. Even behind the scenes, their partnership kept surprising people. George wrote nearly every script, but he always told the public that Gracie was the creative force. In an era where men usually took all the credit, he wanted the world to see her talent. In one 1935 episode, Gracie joked that she had forgotten she was married to George. Fans thought it was real. Thousands of letters poured in accusing George of mistreating her. He had to go on live radio to clear the confusion and say their marriage was strong. Instead of hurting them, the mishap boosted their ratings by 20%. People loved that their fiction felt real. The next big change came when they moved to CBS in 1934 for $10,000 a week. At a time when most Americans made less than $2,000 in an entire year, that paycheck was unreal. They started blending real-life events into their show, especially when Gracie had an emergency appendectomy in 1937. They turned her surgery into part of the storyline and even brought real doctors onto the broadcast. The mix of truth and comedy fascinated everyone and changed how radio writers approached storytelling. It made the audience feel close to them as if they were part of the family. By 1938, their success reached the point where they bought a mansion in Beverly Hills. It should have been a peaceful reward. But one night, George left a lit cigar on a table. The cigar rolled, burned through fabric, and sparked a fire that spread faster than anyone expected. They barely saved the house. Newspapers had a field day with the story. Instead of hiding it, they turned the scare into an episode called "The House That Burns Built." Gracie blamed herself in the script and spun the disaster into jokes that made people fall in love with them even more. Their ability to laugh at their own mistakes became part of their charm. Hollywood was a huge chapter for them, too. Their leap into movies began with the big broadcast in 1932, where their duet, Love and Bloom, made them national figures. But censorship problems kept hitting them. Studio executives thought Gracie's dizzy jokes sounded too suggestive and forced rewrites. George would sneak the original lines back as ad-libs during filming. It was a playful rebellion, but it shaped how comics later pushed against strict studio rules. In 1933, Gracie nearly got hurt in International House when the thin wire attached to her chandelier stunt snapped and dropped her about 10 feet. George happened to be right under her and caught her, cracking 2 ribs in the process. They kept performing, laughing as if the fall was part of the act. The cameraman stood frozen, unsure whether to call for help or keep rolling. That moment ended up in the film, turning a near tragedy into a lasting piece of comedy legend. In 1937, they worked with Fred Astaire on A Damsel in Distress. During one important scene, Gracie panicked and forgot her dance steps, blurting out that she was lost in London. Astaire did not miss a beat. He danced around her confusion and turned it into a spontaneous routine that had the whole set laughing. Hellider called it pure magic. It showed how quick wit could turn accidents into iconic moments. During WWAN, they performed for troops in 1941, lifting spirits across camps. But Gracie got caught in a strange scandal. Silk stockings were scarce during the war, so she smuggled a few pairs to hand out as gifts. Authorities treated it as contraband. She almost faced a court-martial until George pulled every string he had. The troops loved her even more after that. It became one of those hidden stories that revealed just how bold she could be. By 1945, they were at the top. Their film, Two Girls and a Sailor, brought in more than $4 million, but Gracie's health began to decline. She suffered migraines so intense she had to step away for 6 months. During her break, George quietly began writing his autobiography draft. He wanted to preserve their story, especially the small moments that only they knew. That draft later became Gracie, a love story. It captured the heart of their partnership in a way fans never forgot. On October 12, 1950, something new quietly slipped into American living rooms. CBS aired the first episode of The George Burns and Gracie Allen Show, and no one really knew that this little sitcom would change television. It went live with a studio audience, which felt risky at a time when most shows were still built from radio leftovers or dubbed pieces. But the moment George stepped out of a scene and started talking straight to the viewers, people felt pulled in as if he were sitting right beside them. The show climbed fast. It ran for 291 episodes until 1958 and brought them nearly $200,000 per season at its peak. They played themselves in a simple home setting, letting the world think it was peeking into their real life letting the world think it was peeking into their real life. That choice opened the door for the boom of family sitcoms that shaped the 1950s and guided everything that came after. Then came episode 47 in November 1951. The setup was sweet and simple, a surprise birthday party for George linked to Gracie's old campaign events from the 1930s. But the real surprise came from a prop cake that exploded too early. Frosting shot everywhere. The cast froze for a second, then burst into real laughter. The producers let it all air live. People at home heard the shock in the studio and loved every second of it. Early television had no safety net, and accidents like this one became part of its charm. That messy moment turned into one of the most talked about scenes of the decade. But the laughter on screen hit a private wound. In the early 1950s, George admitted that he once had a one-night affair while on tour. The guilt crushed him. To make amends, he bought Gracie a $10,000 diamond ring and a $750 silver centerpiece. She stayed silent, she never confronted him. For decades, the world saw them as perfect. The truth only slipped out years later in his autobiography. And even that pain carried Gracie Shummer. She once told Mary Livingstone, Jack Benny's wife, that she wished George would cheat again because she could use another centerpiece. Behind all the shine of their television marriage stood a private world of regret, forgiveness, and complicated love. As the decade moved on, Gracie started losing strength. She had lived with undiagnosed heart problems since childhood, but only in the 1950s did it become clear how serious they were. By 1957, she was too sick to keep up with filming. George kept the truth private and told the audience she was on vacation. She pushed through angina migraines and even performed after breaking her nose, but she could not keep going forever. She retired in 1958 and on August 27, 1964, she died at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Los Angeles from a heart attack. Her exit closed a chapter of television that had shaped a whole era. In 1956, while their show was still running, Jack Benny made a guest appearance. Fans loved seeing two giants together. But behind the scenes, George tripped over a cable and fractured his hip at age 60. He refused to stop working and filmed the rest of the season sitting down. He turned that injury into another piece of his legend, joking later that it was a small price to pay for comedy. His spirit never bent, even when his bones did. The day Gracie died broke him. On August 27, 1964, she left the world at 69 and George almost collapsed at her funeral. He later said he had cried only twice in his life, once for his mother and once for Gracie. For 2 years after, he kept an empty chair on stage during his live shows. He would turn toward it, deliver lines to her, and tell the audience that she was just off stage. People cried with him. That empty chair became a symbol of the love he carried long after she was gone. But life kept moving. In 1965, he tried a new show called Wendy and Me. He played a landlord who spied on his tenants. It did not land well. Without Gracie's spark, the show felt hollow. It lasted only one season before ABC cut it loose. At 69, George wondered if his career had ended. He went back to nightclub tours, rebuilt from scratch, and learned what it meant to work alone after a lifetime as part of a duo. By 1967, he reached a breaking point. He was drinking heavily and smoking non-stop. During a Las Vegas residency, he collapsed on stage from exhaustion. Doctors told him he would not survive the year if he did not stop. He quit everything overnight. No alcohol, no cigarettes, no easy crutch. He said later that the choice saved his life and it became a turning point that kept him going for decades. In 1969, he tried again with a grandpa for Christmas specials. He hoped they would remind people of who he was.